Transmission 100218.
Welcome to Porcelain Peak, a strange and scary podcast covering all things horror and science fiction. Here are your hosts, Anthony, John, and Anthony.
Welcome to Porcelain Peak,
Oh, God.
a strange and scary podcast. My name is Morgan Freeman.
Somehow, 2 weeks later, that hasn't gotten any better.
Yeah, no, I haven't put any work into it, but I thought that I would bring it back. Welcome to Porcelain Peak, guys. This is Season 2, Episode 28. We are very excited to be here. Woohoo. My name is Anthony Silva, and I'm joined here by John and Anthony. John, how are you doing today?
I am doing pretty good. My spirits have been on a steady incline, I'd say, over the last couple of weeks.
It's always good to have a high volume of spirits.
Yes.
Yeah.
Spirits are an excellent thing to have. If you're a haunted house, if you're a dude, probably if you're like a rundown
bar.
Yeah, a rundown bar. Yeah. Having a high influx of spirits is a good thing to have. But yeah, I've been pretty busy, which is, a good thing in this time. It's been a little bit tough managing time because it's like I'm also at home in my bed or in my chair looking at the TV being like, I wish I could turn you on, but I have to make this thing now. But
that's what I said to my wife.
oh, it was bad. But anyway,
I'm not married. Nobody could ever love me.
That's so true. Anthony, how you doing on that note?
On that note, man, I'm doing pretty dang good. Just keeping it real. Excited to talk about DEVS and excited to pretend that life is real when it's not. So
Yeah, I mean, you have all that heartache and weirdness fresh in your brain because you finished it most recently out of all of us.
by like a couple of hours.
Yeah.
don't take away my thunder. Just because you're on the upswing doesn't mean you need to bring me down. How are you doing, Anthony?
Yeah, I was about to say, not like anybody cares, but I'm doing pretty well. Every week, I feel like the thing that I identify most with that you said is how it's hard to manage time. Not so much that for me it's hard to manage time. It's just that it's hard for me to be like okay with the stretching out the small amount of stuff I have to keep me busy, to cover every day, and feeling like, okay, the next day it's a lot of repetition. So I try to break it up as much as possible with doing stuff for the podcast or doing stuff for the YouTube channel or just doing random Photoshop stuff. I've gotten back into doing some printmaking stuff. I just posted a new digital print that I made.
Nice.
Because I've been wanting to get less on the doing stuff for the podcast on my free time. And now that I have all the free time I could possibly want, I can make stuff for fun. I also listened to the new episode that just came out. Super, super good job editing. I did notice that speaking of my Morgan Freeman accent, I was just singing and doing voices through that whole episode, and I don't know what drug I was on, but I'd like to get back on whatever it was, because I was listening to that episode and I was like, what is going on with Anthony Silva in this episode?
Say you were on the drug of John Brasher, because you basically just took my persona. That's all I am, is to exist as someone who does shitty impressions and sings a lot.
Yeah, every time I'd come in, I'd be like, is that me doing what voice am I doing? Yeah. So I don't know if that's going to continue for this episode, but
this is my impersonation of you impersonating Morgan Freeman. Morgan Freeman.
Yeah, it just sounds like I have mono or something. All right, well, I'm glad everybody's doing well. Today on the episode, we're going to be talking about Alex Garland's new project on Hulu called DEVS. We're going to be diving into DEVS a little bit. That's a new sci-fi thing that I know we were all excited about. In the meantime, though, let's start with some news.
This is it, Jennifer. Your big break in TV. Fuck the prime time, bitch.
Anybody got some news for us?
News? I'm glad you asked. That's crazy.
I'm
Because
so glad
do
you're prepared.
have some.
Yeah.
Check this out. Try this on for size. They're making a scary stories, and they're going to tell them in the dark. and it's going to be a sequel.
That is the best place to tell scary stories I've heard.
Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark 2.
Jesus Christ.
That's how that is. So you're going to not edit any of that and leave it exactly how it is.
I mean, you said it.
Perfect. And that's cool because I think we all enjoyed that movie for what it was, and there was a lot of just unanswered questions that didn't need to be asked, but whatever. I'll watch it again.
Yeah, I've been meaning to rewatch that movie because I actually really enjoyed it. I only saw it the one time in theaters, but
I think I managed to catch it twice, but yeah, it was enjoyable for sure.
Del Toro's at that stage in his career, I feel like, where he can, and I've heard him say this in interviews, he takes very long breaks between making his own big projects, and I think people tend to be disappointed when they see his name attached to like a million different things. Like he was attached to Death Stranding, the video game, for a long time, and he was, back when that was Silent Hills, like that whole thing. He's been attached to a million different projects, and people are like, but yeah, he's not writing, he's not directing. He's in that stage of his career, though, like a Sam Raimi, where he's just like, this is my genre, and I'm going to produce whatever I can that I have like a good feeling about to help other creators make their stuff. Because a lot of these horror directors are probably like, dude, I have Guillermo del Toro producing my movie. Like, I'm going to get a lot more butts and seats. So it upsets me less like now, kind of understanding how that works. I would still love to see something from him, but I feel like he works better in like a give it a few years and then drop like a Shape of Water or drop like a
Pans
or something.
Devil's Backbone, those sorts of things.
But in terms of this, I liked the first one. I'm excited to see more scary stories.
Yeah, and to kind of talk a little bit about specifically like the whole him producing things, it also gives someone who may be less knowledgeable of specific things in the genre to be able to like bounce ideas off of one of the few remaining great auteur filmmakers, and be like, hey, is this fucking weird enough? Is this fucked up enough? Like, is this going to make people shocked? Like, and try to make that happen. It doesn't always happen. I'm sure there were plenty of people who were shocked by things in Death Stranding. I don't know. I don't want to play a game where I have to be a courier for 80 hours. But, but other than that, like, I mean, I felt like that the first Scary Stories was a lot of fun, and I felt like it was perfect entry-level kids horror, which is usually pretty fun for us because, I mean, we have those little nostalgia goodies, and also I'm pretty sure all three of us have read the books. It's a lot of fun, for sure.
Yeah, I agree, and I will be in the theaters if they're open when that comes out.
Yeah, there was some news that just dropped today that actually had nothing to do with any of the news I was planning on bringing, but you happened to mention it. Apparently, AMC will no longer be playing any Universal films in their theaters.
Ever? Why?
What? No fucking idea.
Oh.
Yeah, apparently something in that relationship soured, and they were just like, yeah, we're not playing your movies anymore. I don't know if it was part of the conversation that Universal was like, maybe we won't bring movies back to theaters. Maybe we'll kind of do a both at the same time kind of deal. And they're like, yeah, no, we're not doing that. Yeah. We're not playing your movies in our theaters if you're going to compete by allowing people to see them at home.
Yeah, that sounds like
probably
exactly what happened. Yeah. I think that you cracked it, John. You cracked the case. Yeah, because when you first said that, I was like, why would they do that? And then as soon as I started backtracking in my head as you guys were on. I was like, wait, we've been talking for weeks now about how it's such a big deal that Universal made this move to stream their stuff. And the theaters that are these big corporations are probably looking at this like, what are you guys doing? Like, this isn't the deal we had. And Universal is like, times have changed, man. Get with the program.
Yeah. People are
it's
dying.
Mad Max out there. Yeah. So I'm excited about Universal doing it. AMC, whatever. To me, like, they're a big corporation, and those huge corporations, they can die.
They're talking about going bankrupt anyway, so.
Yeah,
I'm not too concerned about this. There are other theaters that I can go to, or watch them at home if that ends up being what Universal decides to let us do. I'm game for that.
Watch them at home, but leave your phones down. Don't make sure you're engrossed in the film unless it's absolute trash.
Yeah.
But considering you called me a detective, that's a great segue into my next piece of news, which is Deadly Premonition 2 got a release date, and it's saying that based on the trailer for this one, it looks like it's going to be where the first one was very Twin Peaks-ish. This one's looking like...
Is it a video game?
It is a video game.
Oh.
We talked about this...
I was guessing.
We talked about this like 4 or 5 months ago. It was like right before the break. Nintendo dropped one of their directs saying that they were not only bringing the first game to the Switch, but that they were developing a second game specifically for the Switch. And so Deadly Premonition 2 comes out on July 10th. And that game is... seeming like while the first one was very like kind of like tongue-in-cheek but also kind of like taking a lot of heavy influence from something like Twin Peaks, where this one seems like it's going to be more like True Detective, where it's still going to have like its over-the-top kind of humor and style that's just batshit crazy, but it's also going to have like a pretty intense mystery that goes along with it. So it'd be interesting to see how it turns out, but it definitely is kind of in our wheelhouse. And then keeping things in the video game realm, they did also give a new release date for The Last of Us 2, which is not nearly as far out as people thought it was going to be. They said, we're going to have to postpone it indefinitely. And they were like, fuck, we're never going to get this game. It's not going to come out till PS5. And they're like, oh, no, we're just going to bring it out in June. It was supposed to be coming out in May on the 29th.
And now it's June 19th, the day after my birthday. So, if anybody's looking to get Anthony anything. Anthony Silva.
So that's like the fourth thing you've asked for in the last like hour.
I have my demands, John, and they must be met.
I'll give you a fucking handshake right now, buddy. I'll even do it lefties for you.
That's fine, thank you.
Don't touch him. Social distancing.
That's super cool. Yeah, I'm really excited about... I don't know anything about this Deadly Premonition, but you said Twin Peaks, and now I am at least at half-mast about this game. And I was actually...
He's got a single P.
Yeah. I was looking the other day because I was like, maybe I want to get into like a... is this like a narrative? It's like a narrative, like, okay, cool. Because I was looking the other day and I was like, maybe I don't want to get into like an adventure or a shooter or anything like that. Like, and I was like, maybe I'll replay The Last of Us. And I thought, ooh, maybe I'll get into like a narrative spooky game, like a narrative horror game. So that sounds cool. I might have to check that out because that seems like definitely something that would be up my wheelhouse. I like those kind of games. And The Last of Us is still to this day one of my favorite video games of all time, and definitely my favorite PS4 title. So I am absolutely over the moon about the fact that we're getting the second one around my birthday, which will actually just give me the excuse to go out and blow money on it.
Yeah.
And I'll say it's a birthday gift to myself, so I already have that plan. So in my neck of the woods, first thing I wanted to mention is kind of funny. It's a quick little bit. There is a company called, I believe it's Big Bad Toys, is now selling an 8-foot tall, like a full-sized xenomorph that you can buy for your house.
That's fucking awesome.
Yeah, it's modeled after, it looks like the xenomorph from the original Alien. So it looks a lot more like a dude in a suit. Very cool. Reminds me of how Lee Winnell has the Terminator in his office. I would love to have like a full-size xenomorph just in the corner staring at me. Problem is, in order to get this bad boy, you have to put down a lovely down payment of 1,600 buckaroos toward an $8,000 price tag. So good luck with that. We'll set that as a goal for if the podcast ever gets popping. My bigger news that I'm actually more excited about is that HBO is teaming up with David Gordon Green, who just did Halloween 2018, to make a Hellraiser series. Oh, wow. Which is pretty cool. I think this fits really nicely in kind of like the course of the news that we've had. We talk a lot about streaming, and we talk a lot about the future of these horror franchises. And a lot more now we're seeing things like Don Mancini wanting to do his Child's Play TV series, and then we're seeing Hellraiser. My questions are, one, is Clive Barker going to be involved in any capacity? Because he hasn't really been involved with Hellraiser for quite a long time, and that series tanked super, super hard. In a series that and fight me or change my mind on this, I don't honestly think the original is anything particularly special outside of like having really good special effects.
It's kind of like Event Horizon in that way. Like Event Horizon is fucked up, obviously, and if it had been allowed to be released in the way that it should have been released and allowed the time to suss out some of its narrative problems, that movie could have been great, but it's more just like some really fucked up gore porn. Yeah,
so I am definitely going to check it out. I have not seen any Hellraiser movies past 2, I believe, so I think some people will probably be upset at me because I know a lot of people love like 1, 2, or 3 as being like the ultimate version of Hellraiser for them. But HBO really seems to be putting a lot of money behind doing these like horror projects and teaming up with these creators, which is what they should be doing if they're launching the streaming service. I believe it comes out soon,
very
within the next couple weeks. That doesn't mean the Hellraiser show is coming out anytime soon, but I'm excited to see that that's in the works and that we will be getting more Hellraiser.
Yeah,
so,
I knew we were going to be talking about that one. Thank you again to Ashley the intern for hitting us up with that information during the week. So I would definitely suggest to keep an eye out for when HBO Max drops. There's supposed to be a lot of things coming. I don't know. They're having a lot of conversations about a lot of things that are coming later. I don't know exactly what's dropping at launch. So we'll see how it goes. I know that if you have HBO now HBO Max will be the same price and have all of the same features of now, just with more shit. So probably roll that service over.
Sweet.
I don't know what I'm going to do because mine's part of my Hulu account, so I'm going to have to figure that shit out.
That's how they get you. They do these bundles and then they try to tear you apart. Oh, my other question is if Doug Bradley's going to come back as Pinhead.
Yeah.
I'd be very interested to see if that's going to happen, but who knows. Anyway, so if any of that news interests you and you'd like to delve a little bit deeper, if you go ahead and hop on over to the Facebook page, that is where I have been posting links to articles that relate to all of this news, so we can hold a little bit more in-depth discussions. We don't want to go on for absolutely forever. So let's go ahead and, in the vein of speeding things along, move on to trivia.
Trivia!
What segment is it?
Trivia! T to the R to the IVIA.
Here's how we play. I ask a question. If you get it right, Steve lives.
Please don't do that.
Come on, it'll be fun.
Please.
It's an easy category.
Please.
Movie trivia. Or even give you a warm-up question.
Don't do this, I can't.
Name the killer in Halloween.
So we'll get started. Anthony Press here. He'll be reading the John Brasher there, and then he's going to read to that there, Anthony Silva over there, and then right back to me here.
Where did you just move to, and how quickly did you pick up the accent?
Also, do we have our own, did we catch something from a voice actor, like, a few weeks back, and now...
So
I am an actor.
So you were John Ratzenberger, for sure. 1,000% John Ratzenberger.
I don't know who that is.
It's Toy Story.
Yeah, well, basically, he has a voice acting part in literally every Pixar movie.
Here we go, John. Monster category here, bud. The plot to what film is set in motion when the entire population of an English village falls unconscious?
The Happening.
That's not happening. It is Village of the Damned, which is the one that we have not seen that comes up on all these.
Well, because
on this cart, on this and that, and those.
Well,
other
every
ones.
question we've gotten has been about the hair color of the children. So that's
Right.
all you ever need to know about Village of the Damned to win the other trivia.
They got platinum blonde hair. That's gonna be a goose egg.
Gooser. Right there, bud. What director helmed
We
both?
can't all do the same accent. I won't be able to tell you guys apart.
What director? I almost slipped back into it. What director helmed both The Bride of Frankenstein and Frankenstein?
Ooh, this is crazy. So I just checked out this YouTube channel called
Here
Here
Be
Be Monsters. And it tells me that those movies were directed by the great James Whale.
Yeah.
Thank you. All right, cool. Perez, what is the name of the character played by Bela Lugosi in The Wolfman, 1941?
Wolfie.
Good old Wolfie.
According to this card, Bela's character name was Bela. He is a gypsy that is the first werewolf of the film.
Huh. There you go.
I haven't gotten to Wolfman yet in my YouTube series, so I wouldn't have known that.
Redacted.
That's in the 40s. Yeah.
All right.
All right, so that puts us at 0-1-0.
Keeping it
Anthony
binary.
on track for the four-peat as we move into gore and disturbing. John, in The Loved Ones from 2009, who is Brent Mitchell's girlfriend? Is it Lola Stone? Is it Holly? Is it Mia Valentine? Or is it Carla?
I feel like they put two of them with last names to try to throw you off the scent. But I'm going to say Mia Valentine because it just sticks out like a sore thumb.
It was Holly.
Yeah.
Swing and a miss. Swing.
All right. What are the final words of protagonist, as you would say, protagonist Max Wren in Videodrome from 1983?
Is it something to do with the new flesh? Is it something like We Are the New Flesh or Behold the New Flesh or something new flesh?
I need a final answer.
Yeah, this sucks because I feel like I know like half of it and I don't know what the actual thing they're telling you to do with the new flesh is. I don't know. I'm gonna guess and say it's We Are the New Flesh.
It's so fucking close. It's Long Live
The New Flesh. Yeah, I knew it was something like that.
Damn. That honestly was pretty good.
Any other week, and I probably would have been like, "You got enough."
But
And
we're getting like super
Yeah.
competitive now on
yeah,
these. Yeah.
it's like somebody needs to at least dethrone you for a week.
Yeah, after I picked apart your poltergeist thing, picked apart your poltergeist.
Fuck yeah.
How many Fogtown founders?
Yeah, after I picked that apart, I don't blame you for grilling me on that one. So, Tone, in Trick or Treat from 2007, a pod favorite, the group of 4 women are revealed to be what type of monsters? Witches, vampires, werewolves, or zombies?
Witches.
Ooh, I'm sorry. They were werewolves. Yeah. Remember when they tear their
Wolvies.
skin off and it starts playing that Marilyn Manson song? Sweet dreams are... And they start tearing their skin off and they're werewolves. Pretty cool.
Super tight, bro. Super tight.
All right, well, that brings us to the end of the Gore and Disturbing round. That puts us at 0, 1, 0. Fucking rad. John, let's get you on the board right here with the psychological category. And the question is, Gerald's Game from 2017 was released on what streaming service?
That would be Netflix.
That is correct.
Good job.
On the board.
All right. What word does protagonist Michelle
Word.
protagonist Michelle finds scratched into a second hatch when repairing a ventilator in 10 Cloverfield Lane from 2016? Word on the hatch. Word on the hatch. Word on the word.
I remember the
word on
scene.
hatch. Hey.
And this is going to be another one of those. Man. This is going to be an unbearable episode to listen to.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's see.
Or a really, really good time.
Something about John Goodman's character being a liar, being a fraud. I don't know.
Is that your answer?
Yeah, sure.
It's just help.
So fucking dumb. That would have been my first guess, and I was like, there's no way that 10 Cloverfield Lane just has a scene where it says help on the window. Whatever. Okay, well, I just have to hope that you guys tank the rest of your cards. Anthony, what actress played Jessie Burlingham in Gerald's Game from 2017? How does this happen every single time we play?
I know.
Eliza Dushku.
Ooh, sorry, it was Carla Gugino. My personal favorite. I'm going to call it a pod favorite.
Personal favorite what?
Sexy lady. And actress.
All right, fuck it. That's the end of that round. And John's at 1, Anthony's at 1, and I'm at 0 as we move into the paranormal category. John, are you ready?
See.
What is the name of the leader of the Revenants in The Fog from 1980? Fogtown Founders.
This is very creepy. Creepier than The Fog. And for that reason, I do not remember any of the names of the characters of The Fog because I thought it was pretty boring.
It is. I'm not going to get an argument from you there.
I'm going to say Cardinal Jamie Lee Curtis.
Blake.
Tight.
It was help.
It was help, please. All right. In Paranormal Activity 2 from 2010, what is the relationship between Christy and Katie?
They're sisters.
Correct.
Sweet.
He takes the lead.
Just watched most of those movies recently. Speaking of movies that get boring. All right. So, Anthony, your next question is, from where is the adult Tim released in the beginning of Oculus 2014?
Like a psychiatric hospital.
Yep, you got it.
On the board.
That's my least favorite Flanagan shenanigan.
Yeah, me too.
I found that Flanagan shenanigan enjoyable. But
I think I
Speaking
like
of, I think
Absentia more.
Absentia is on Shudder.
Shudder.
yeah,
Yeah.
it just got on there
Fucking
recently.
motherfucker. Couldn't have done that 6 months ago.
I watched that movie while I was in the sky.
That's crazy, bro.
Yeah, thousands of feet up in the air.
Thousands.
Yeah.
All right, so that's the end of round 4.
And boy, were my arms tired.
John's got 1, Anthony's got 2, and I am finally on the board. Can I get some cheering?
Yay.
Just insert audio clip of crickets. Yeah.
Woo! On fire as we move into Killer John. To what Bill Murray film is the plot of Happy Death Day similar?
Groundhog Day.
That is correct. The characters even reference the film when discussing the situation of the protagonist.
Oh my god, it's so meta.
Yeah, so meta. All right, this should be something that you probably know. What 1953 film was released in 3D despite its director, Andre de Toth, being blind in one eye and unable to experience the 3D effects.
Psycho 3D.
It is House of Wax.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I haven't seen the original. I've seen the
Paris Hilton one.
Paris Hilton one, yeah.
Yeah, same.
All right, well, I'm still in the lead, so it's all right.
No, you're
You
not.
guys are tied,
We are
bro.
tied, baby.
Okay.
2-2.
I actually feel better about that. It's like when you're first place in Mario Kart and you're like, now I'm more scared than I've ever been. All right. Perez, the titular day in Happy Death Day 2017 is also the birthday of what character? You definitely didn't shuffle these.
Mackenzie.
Well, they call her Tree in the movie, which is why I thought
that's
it's weird.
right.
Here it says Teresa Gelbman, but I think maybe once in the whole movie they mentioned the fact their name is Teresa, because I remember
And
watching
the
that movie.
last name, like,
Yeah, I remember it's probably on a document or something you see at some point, but I remember watching that movie being like, Tree's a weird ass name, and now it makes sense, but still.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it says that.
So as soon as I realized that, I was like, you're not going to get this, I'm sorry.
Bitch. All right. Well, that's cool. Those guys are tied. I only got one. We're going to go to international. John in Suspiria from 1977. What type of dancer is protagonist Susie Bonnion?
ballet.
That is correct, John. You have 3 points now.
All right. And then for the tie to go to a tiebreaker round, what type of fictional entities are the threat in Wreck from 2007?
Zombies.
That's correct.
Dang.
And Perez, what type of musician is protagonist Munn? Is protagonist Munn in The Eye from 2002?
Guitarist.
Violinist.
Ah.
Tiebreaker.
What actor from the killer category played Detective Donald Kimball in American Psycho from 2000?
I'm just gonna throw out a fucking a person who I know is not in the movie.
Willem Dafoe.
I was gonna say William H. Macy.
It is Willem Dafoe.
Oh, sweet. It just dawned on me, like out of nowhere.
So he wins.
Yeah. Like I said, it's predetermined.
That's it for trivia. You win. Good job. Congratulations.
Sweet. What's the longest? I think I've asked this question before. What's the longest streak that you guys have ever had?
I think it's 4.
Yeah.
So
I think I got 4 in the past, and I started bragging that I was going to get like the longest streak, and then I lost. I think that's happened in the past. So,
I don't know. Yeah.
So you're trying to just play it aloof?
well, I'm just trying at this point to see if like I
You can
need
get a
to
perfect
be
card?
rewarded or have some sort of like big prize or cash reward or something.
You know what you could do is move the episode along.
Okay. All right. If you enjoyed that trivia, subscribe to the podcast so you can enjoy more trivia in the future. But in the meantime, let's go ahead and move on to our main discussion.
I know this steak doesn't exist. I know that when I put it in my mouth, the Matrix is telling my brain that it is juicy and delicious. After 9 years, you know what I realize? Ignorance is bliss.
So, like I mentioned earlier, we were all interested in a little Alex Garland project. Alex Garland, who we're, I believe, all fans of.
Most certainly.
Yeah, he is a writer/director who is responsible for
28 Days Later.
Yeah, 28 Days Later. One of my
He wrote that?
He wrote that, yeah.
My favorite zombie film of all time, I think maybe.
He produced 28 Weeks Later. He wrote a very popular book, I believe, in the 90s called The Beach.
Right.
Which he is,
was made-
which is now not a fan of.
Yeah, 'cause wasn't it made into a movie?
Yeah, with
yeah,
Leo
with
and,
Leo, yeah.
and Boyle directed it.
Yeah.
And then
He might have probably written the movie too.
and
I
then
think so, yeah.
since then he's done a lot of other things, but the big highlights have been since he's moved into the director/writer's chair. And Ex Machina, which is famously on my shameful sci-fi misses list, and Annihilation, which is on my top sci-fi movie of the last decade, which is an absolutely fantastic film, and I loved every second of it. And then now he has DEVS as a project, which is something we're going to talk about right now.
I think that what's really cool, just starting off, is that this show, and I guess it's happening a lot more with shows, feels so fucking cinematic. It's crazy how much I was like, dude, this one should not be on TV. And two, if it is on TV, shouldn't be on FX of all places. You know what I mean?
Well, it's
gorgeous.
It looks better than a lot of movies.
I was talking to Brittany about it last night. I was like, so like I would need 100 people's fingers and toes to count all of the movies that I've seen over the course of the last like 5 years that look so much shittier than this TV show does.
He is someone who puts a lot of attention into what his worlds look like because he is somebody who is really into building entirely new sci-fi worlds and making them believable. And he knocks it out of the park with basically everything that he does. The wackiest like departure from that he's done was Annihilation. But like Ex Machina is definitely like you feel like that entire world of that facility, even though it is taking place in one place, that the whole facility and that whole world feels 100% real. Like you could believe that that's actually happening.
Right.
Devs feels that way, even though it gets, just the way the world is built. Yes, it gets into some fantastical things, but I feel like always keeps a
foot in realism.
A foot in like this is based in real stuff, and therefore the world needs to look like a real place you could go to out in San Francisco or wherever. Which, again, I've said this before on the pod, but shout out to anything that takes place in the Bay Area in San Francisco.
Yeah, it's like yay LA, yay San Francisco, fuck LA, fuck New York.
Anytime I see something that takes place in San Francisco, I'm like, I feel so like at ease and like at home in something that takes place in San Francisco, even though I've never lived there. Like it's the closest like big city to us, so it's what I'm the most familiar with, and so I always like that.
Why don't we talk briefly about what the show is about?
Yeah.
So essentially, it's about a tech company called Amaya. And they have this department called DEVS that's for like the top of the employees that work there. A murder takes place or a suicide, who knows? There's definitely going to be spoilers for this because we can't talk about this without it. That being said, things start to unravel and we get to see what's going on inside DEVS because it's kept a secret for a good chunk of the series, or the season, I should say. And then just kind of how that unfolds and develops.
Yeah, as far as using like a technology campus as kind of like their set place, they do a very good job of doing their research and, coming with things that are actually plausible and things that exist in real life, like quantum computers. Those are a real thing. Those are things that are being developed right now, The language they use for coding and encryption, all those things, they check out. Those are things that are supposed to be that way. Using Fibonacci sequencing as kind of like just like an off joke between two coders, like that's something that would probably happen. And then the use of the term qubits, that's actually something that is a deep level thing in quantum computing. So all that stuff checks out, which is super cool because you all know how I hate when people use techno jargon that doesn't work. Or like they try to throw like they're like, oh, everything is nanites or everything is fucking.
They're always using algorithms.
Yeah, like it's all the same like tired things over and over and over again. And this seems like they really dug deep and tried to make sure that what they were doing was somewhat based in realism.
Well, and I think that the way I feel about that aspect of the show was something that I definitely thought about this because, especially toward the beginning when you don't really know what's going on with devs, a lot of that techno jargon stuff is kind of annoying because it's just smart people sitting there doing smart people things, and I consider myself a smart person, but I don't have the capacity to like fully understand how what they're doing in the show like comes together and makes sense. So I feel like I always respect when shows do that, and I'm sure that this show had some scientific or some coding like reference people, like some professionals to help him do this. I'm sure on his projects he's one of those types. It's making sure that the story still makes sense and the science, like he can say like, oh, hey, yeah, the science makes 100% sense theoretically or whatever.
Yeah.
I'm like, that's cool. Don't care. Techno jargon in one ear, out the other, as long as at the end of the day, the story makes sense. And I feel like, oh, okay, the science isn't so completely out there. Like I could still understand, okay, well, I kind of have a handle on what they're trying to do based on what they're saying. And if it makes sense in the end and I can put it together, that's what works. And I felt like this show did a good job of that once you start learning with the main character and stuff, what devs is.
Yeah.
I had the help of I had listened to a podcast beforehand that had kind of gave a synopsis that unfortunately maybe kind of spoiled what devs was. So I kind of knew that they were doing, I guess we can get into spoilers now because that's what we're going to start talking about, plot things. But spoiler warning for anybody. I highly recommend right here off the bat that you go check out the show. So I kind of knew it was some sort of like had something to do with like looking into time. But that was as much as I knew. As I knew that had something to do with like using code to look through time. And I knew that there was going to be a moment where they like saw Jesus on the cross. But that's all I knew about the premise. So the rest was still a surprise. I was telling John that this show definitely like was a slow start for me.
Yeah.
It took me. I watched the first 3 episodes a couple weeks back, like 3 episodes ago, and I think I probably mentioned it in recommendations or watch list. And then I came back to it when we decided to do it for this episode, and it still took me like another episode to be like, okay, this feels like homework for the podcast. And it wasn't until about episode 5 or so where I was like, okay, now I'm actually really into this and I'm enjoying this. And then 6, 7, and 8 were off the wall. They were awesome, and then I appreciated the whole show. The thing. I don't know if we want to get into complaints now. We can just talk about,
We'll keep it off. We
can save it for a section, but
Well, one thing I want to say is that at least for me, the jargon didn't turn me off. Like, yeah, I didn't understand fucking most of it, but like you were saying, it develops enough throughout where it's like, okay, cool, and it didn't bother me, I think, as much as maybe it bothered you, but they push it forward enough. And I was like, well, at least it's hella cool to look at. Like, everything was visually gorgeous when they got into devs. I was like, I don't care how any of that shit works. That's dope.
yeah, no, it didn't really bother me. I guess what I was trying to say more is just like I'm not the type to be bothered if they get it wrong. Like, say that they just made it all up, I wouldn't be bothered by that. As long as we get the gist of like, say, Lyndon comes up with the code to solve the whole thing and is rattling off like, we tried this, this, and this, which I'm sure are all actual theorems and things that exist in that scientific field, and then lists like this, and then says this one works. All I care about is that Lyndon came up with something, everybody's mad about it, or like and
Everyone's
the
excited
conflict
about
of the
it,
story.
yeah.
Yeah, I don't care if it's like in Thor, like the Einstein-Rosen bridge or whatever. I'm just gonna call it the Rainbow Bridge, and I'm happy with that. Like, I don't need to know that like Einstein's theory of traveling into Marvel continuities like actually makes any scientific sense. So, but yeah, I thought that I appreciate when they do that, and something that I wanted to get into maybe a little bit later, but I'll touch on it now because it does relate. And I don't want to risk spoiling anything for you, so I'll keep it very vague. But you, Anthony, having seen Mr. Robot, to me, this show had a lot of similarities. That's all I was going to say is that it had a lot of similarities.
I got so prepared. I took my headphones off and everything.
All I have to say is like in terms of some of the like themes, especially toward like the end of Mr. Robot, like some of the stuff.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
That stuff reminded me of like, oh, Alex Garland might have seen Mr. Robot, and then also the way that Mr. Robot does a really good job of researching their coding and making sure it's all accurate and doing the techno jargon, but not making it pull you out of the story. That reminded me of Mr. Robot.
All of this is like you're selling this in the best way you've attempted to sell it to me so far.
Well, I was going to text you last night when you were telling me how much you love devs and say, guess what? Go watch Mr. Robot. It's completely different, but there are things that remind me of Mr. Robot in this show.
Yeah.
This show is a lot more like high sci-fi, like conceptual, heady stuff than...
Yeah, and I think that's part of the reason why I mean, shocker, I fucking loved this show. And part of the reason is because, in my teenage years, I spent a lot of time studying...
You don't want to know, John.
That's why we're on this podcast, is to listen to my opinions about things. God damn it.
I was just talking about what you did in your teenage years every day.
So no, I spent a lot of time studying religion and also studying... the concept of free will versus determinism.
Yeah.
Because it's a heavy thing that comes up in a lot of different types of like pseudo religions. And it was something that I knew some of the things about like the Everett theory and like the multiple universes and that sort of thing. Those were things that really like got my goat when I was younger. I was like, I'd sit up and I'd read things and be really excited about them. Just be like, it's like, oh, I don't know what's real. Like, I feel like I'm making all of my decisions for myself, but who says that I'm not? Or who says that that I may think that I am, and I'm completely not doing that. And it's
so you're telling me that
weird.
You spent a bunch of your teenage years just sitting around reading about like weird quantum theory, and you're telling me you turned out to be as cool as you are now?
You got married?
So a lot of it is that like I had friends that discussed a lot of things like that, and so it was always I needed to learn enough to be able to have those conversations. But they were things that once you get to a certain point, you start like, oh, that's interesting. Like, it's not like I can go like deep into it with you, but I could be like the fact that I understand like the basics of it, like the Cliff Notes version of it, which is cool. Like it's nice to have that little kind of like weird knowledge that you shouldn't have, but. But yeah, like the whole concept of this, especially considering like I said, I've also been over the course of the last like 6 or 7 months, I've been, little by little dabbling in coding, in order to try to push my career forward and stuff like that. So all of this kind of just came around together and just like made a perfect television show for John Bradford.
Isn't that nice when you're like in that sweet spot for a TV show?
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't happen most of the time, but sometimes you'll just be in a zone or a place in your life where like a TV show comes along and it really just hits you where you live.
Yeah.
And this obviously was a show like that for you. I mean, I did the same thing with my friends all the time, and I love stuff like this. It's why, like, it reminds me of how much I love sci-fi, because a lot of the time I tend, especially these days, I tend to be like, oh, like horror all day, every day. Like, I'd always go horror over sci-fi, and I'll do sci-fi if the right thing comes along. But then something like this happens, and it reminds me, like, one, why I love creators like Alex Garland who can do that sci-fi that makes me
Terrified a little bit.
Well, it makes me terrified, but like it emotionally impacts me, and then I feel like I get to the end of it and I have that like whoa moment. Like you texted after where you were like wowzer or whatever. That's I sat there with just the credits rolling at the end of the show, and I had one of those moments where you just sit and you're like, I could start something new now, but I need some time.
Show
Yeah.
hole.
Yeah. And that's exactly how I felt, because this show did a really good job of taking, because I read an interview with Alex Garland and he said that he had just spent a lot of years thinking about determinism and multiple realities and things like that. And so he just took this really heady scientific concept and put it on a tramline of an emotional story and a thrilling story, and really made the emotion of why Nick Offerman, who we definitely need to talk about, why his character is doing what he's doing.
Christ.
And then just brings up all these questions about like, is everything the character's doing predetermined,
Yeah.
or is it of their own free will? How much of it is part of Nick Offerman's giant plan? And you don't really know all of that until the very end of the show. And so the whole time you're wondering, you're like, how much of this does he know is going to happen? Like how much? And they even address that in the show where they're like, looking into the future is dangerous.
Yeah.
So basically, like for anybody who's still listening to this and doesn't care about spoilers or anything and is curious what's going on in DEVS, they're basically using code to look at these, for the most part, pixelated, shitty, like shot on a potato versions of things that happened in the past, and they're basically recreating these scenes as a simulation. But they're also able to experiment with looking into the future, and the show kind of deals with him trying to defend this idea and bring it to fruition, while the main character, the lead, is investigating this murder, and how they all kind of spin around each other.
One thing I wanted to bring up to you guys, and I don't know how you'll respond to it, but to me, this show, especially when you get to the end, felt like a horror show disguised as a sci-fi show.
I would definitely agree.
If they took an episode of Black Mirror and stretched it to a full season, that's what this would be.
Well, did you hear the music? Like, there are scenes
Yeah.
where I was sitting there, like, sweating because the music was, like, it's, like,
Terrifying.
screaming at you. And I told him that it's crazy how the music was able to go from, and Nick Offerman's character, too, go from being, like, comforting, kind of almost tribal, weird little stuff that makes you feel so happy, or, like, an old song where you're like, ooh, I like this song, it's good. And then by the end of the episode, it's, like, screaming in your ear and you're terrified while Nick Offerman is threatening to kill somebody.
Just
or
covered
like,
in goosebumps, like fucking,
Yeah.
it was incredible. I wanted to definitely give a shout out to two of Garland's normal co-contributors.
Senoia Mizuno
Has also been in
She was notably in Ex Machina. She was one of the robots. She's the one that dances with him.
And
I
then-
knew I recognized her. And in Annihilation, isn't she the humanoid?
I think so.
She's the silvery alien thing at the end.
Oh, really?
But
Yeah.
Rob Hardy is his normal cinematographer, who has been on both of those films and did all the cinematography for DEVS. The composer who did all of the score for it is Ben Salisbury, who also did the score for Annihilation and for Ex Machina.
Yeah, I mean, that
you
guy.
could hear it.
Yeah.
Too. I was like, this felt a lot like Annihilation. Like if they got to the anomaly and it was the beginning of Annihilation, like something had come down and like struck it, and then Annihilation started, I would have.
Well, especially since it
blended
takes place
straight
like out in
you
the
know
middle of the
what I mean?
woods.
Right?
So
Like, yeah.
I wanted to touch on that because there are a couple of things that, aside from the actors and aside from the people who worked on the film who directly connect those films together, as far as references to those previous works, the first one is obviously the true name of DEVS, DEV, S in Roman numerals. It comes out to Deus, which completing the statement of basically an act of God that stops an act.
Yeah, Deus
Is
Ex Machina.
Deus Ex Machina,
Yeah.
which is a direct connection to Ex Machina. and then the other one is that there is a fort in Annihilation called Fort Amaya that they cross. Like, you can actually see the name and the title. So, I mean, for me, that would just mean that this has been in the works for a long time. This has been something that's been on his mind for years and years and years. So I don't know if Mr. Robot was anything that had like any kind of an influence, because that was 2 years ago.
I mean, I doubt it. It would be funny, but yeah, I felt like such an idiot when he revealed that, because I remember playing like the old Deus Ex games, the video games, and they had like the golden lettering or whatever on the cover, and I remember seeing the devs font and hearing the concept and thinking like, oh, this kind of reminds me of those old Deus Ex games. And yeah, and so like the whole time I'm like, oh, that's funny, and I did not even once
like make the connection
that the V would be a U and that it would be Deus. And then when he did it, I was like, that's super corny, but I didn't pick up on it, so it's suddenly genius.
Yeah.
Like, then I was like, oh my god, really?
What I thought was interesting too, and Garland does this all the time, is he blends these high-tech ideas or otherworldly concepts, like with Annihilation or with the AI in Ex Machina, and puts them in a space that's very organic. And we see that throughout this whole thing, right? Where it's this massive tech company,
But in, like, the
Dev
redwoods.
itself, is in the middle of a fucking forest. They have to take buses and shuttles to get to it. You know what I mean?
I love how he has like, I don't know if there's ever an explanation for why it exists, but like the forest having those cool like lit up
halos.
the halos around them.
Just so that Lily could stand under it.
Yeah,
Well,
for
and
the
Nick
marketing
Offerman
and
could
stuff.
send it over too, yeah.
I mean, it makes for a great set piece, and then when you go up and there's that cool sculpture of all the gold like obelisks, remind me a lot of like 2001. And characters walk through that, and there's all the reflections and everything, and it makes for really cool set pieces. And to me, it's like, well, if you had this giant complex, why wouldn't you just put some cool, super modern art out? And I respected that. I was like, I do the same thing, but I completely agree. I think that that really is like the most logical and believable course for technology to take in like this kind of near future sci-fi, is a more organic take. And bringing up my favorite human being, Lee Winnell, once again on his upgrade commentary. He talked about how all of the technology in that is like made to look like trees or sound like water and things, because his idea was that in the future we're going to be trying to make our technology as much like nature as possible. And so making more organic technology, to me, is the most believable path that we would take. Try to make things make us feel like we're outdoors without actually being outdoors.
Yeah.
And if he's trying to hide something, obviously putting it in a giant forest is a super good idea.
Yeah, definitely.
Except
I mean,
for,
that's where all the apes are living, right?
Except for the giant statue of his daughter.
Yeah.
Gives his location away a bit.
Yeah, which I was talking to him. I mean, that was the one part of the effects, I think, in the whole show where every time I saw it, I was like, ugh.
And I don't think it was because the effect was bad. I think it was just because it sticks out like a sore thumb.
Yeah.
I think it's meant to look creepy,
Yeah,
for sure.
it's meant to look weird, yeah.
Let's talk about the acting. I think there's three, for me at least, there's three main characters where the actors really stood out. Obviously, Lily, what's her name?
Her name is
Senoia.
Senoia Mizuno.
Yeah. Nick Offerman, and then Alison Pill. Wow. I mean, we just watched Scott Pilgrim very recently, and to see her in such a drastically different role. And
Or if you've ever seen Goon, she's in Goon as well, and that character is so different from this one.
Wasn't she in... I feel like she was in Heroes, too. Wasn't she in Heroes at some point?
That I wouldn't know. I've only seen the first season.
She was fucking great in this, dude. Like, the whole time I was watching, I was like, dude, she's awesome.
Yeah.
She did great. Lily was amazing. And for me, I think, and maybe for you guys too, but Nick Offerman stood out so hard.
Yeah, I have Nick Offerman was a standout.
It's so hard for these characters that you know and love to differentiate them from their original places. Like with Daniel Radcliffe, he's always going to be Harry Potter, you know what I mean? Even though he does a lot more other things and he's distancing himself from that. Same with kind of Robert Pattinson. We've talked about how he's trying to distance himself from being Edward. Nick Offerman is fucking Ron Swanson.
Yeah, 1,000%.
Yeah, and I was like, okay, I'll give this a shot, see how he does. And there's moments when I forgot that it was Ron Swanson. Like,
yeah.
He dives so deep into this role and plays it off almost robotically, which I thought was really interesting. Him and Allison are very robotic in these roles until like the emotions get really, really deep. And I was like, dude, this is good.
Yeah.
And he was great, and he looks awful.
Yeah, I mean, I completely 100% agree with everything you said about Alison Pill and about Nick Offerman, because I think they were both great. And I really like that Allison's character throughout the course. She starts out being very like blank-faced, stern, annoying, kind of. Like, you're just like, what is this character? And then that gives a good opportunity for a character arc, and you really feel for her character down the line when she has to make some pretty tough decisions and have some really tough conversations with people. I really, especially that scene on the dam with Lyndon is like one of the most heartbreaking scenes I've watched in a while in something.
Aside from the scene that happened in like 2 episodes before that, where Forrest has to watch his entire family die in front of his fucking
and then we were
face.
talking about that scene last night. So that ties into a larger point that I wanted to make that I think is super cool is the way that Alex Garland is able to, and good sci-fi creators in general are able to take this complex scientific idea and visualize it in a really interesting and artistic way. And the way he decided to do the multiple realities, like frenetically splitting apart in a moment, it comes out of nowhere. But then once it starts doing it, it's so mesmerizing to watch. And
it makes the damn scene hella sad.
Yeah,
Like,
because
even
you have to
more
watch it
impactful.
over and over. And it draws it out because then you don't know the whole time it's happening whether that's the reality that actually happened or not until she walks away and the scene ends and you're like, and then you see Lyndon dead, which was very depressing, which we can talk a little bit more about Lyndon because there was some interesting stuff around that we were talking about. But yeah, in terms of Alison Pill's character, I thought that she had a really good arc. Nick Offerman, also, I was like, man, I really hate him, but I love him because he's so scary and this is such a different thing for him.
Yeah.
And a really good move because he's really been leaning into that Nick Offerman character, Nick Offerman, Ron Swanson character as people like would expect him to.
Right.
And so it's nice to see him doing something completely different.
Yeah, it's definitely going to open some doors for him.
My, I don't know, apparently hot take is that I did not really care at all for the main character in the show, which ended up being my biggest complaint with the show and the reason that I had a hard time getting into it in the first place was that anything that revolved around her up until like the last couple episodes, I had absolutely zero interest in. To me, I felt like she was, and this could be in the writing, which is why I mentioned to you when I had first started watching it that I felt like there was something off about the show and I didn't know if Alex Garland could handle a TV show and maybe he was better in just short form, like with movies in terms of the writing. I didn't feel like the script for some characters in the show was very good at all.
Yeah.
And I felt like stuff for like all the dev side was where Garland was really putting his passion, and all of the writing there seems to really work for the most part and is very poetic and over the top and interesting. But then when it comes to him writing believable, regular characters where it's like her and her, I don't ever give a shit about her relationship to the guy who got killed, to Sergey, or what's his name? Sergey or whatever. Like, I didn't care about that. And so I didn't feel for her like motivation. And then to me, she's basically just like a boring blank, like I'm troubled character for like most of the show. And then they try to throw in a little bit of like, she has mental health issues, so she could be imagining everything. But we don't believe that because we as the audience already know. Like
her little ruse with the love and sister.
Yeah, they run the risk of like deflating the tension out of the show, which I feel like it still works out, but they deflate the tension by revealing in the first episode that we already know that Nick Offerman and DEVS are behind killing Sergey. And we find out pretty quickly that he was a spy, like within those first couple episodes. So after that, to me, I forgot about his character until the very end. Then the plot, like, to me, I was like, whatever.
I think that kind of plays into how she feels, though, because then toward the middle, right, she's like, I don't even know him. And it's like, well, we didn't even know him either. So she quits caring about him, and we have not really ever cared about
That's when I felt like her character started to make some progress. And then I really liked the...
Jamie,
yeah. I really liked that actor, and I liked the character.
Yeah, he was
and
good
I felt
too.
like
Jinha.
he brought a lot into that mix that
Yeah.
made those scenes with her more interesting because I'm like, yeah, I'm sure she's a great actress, but I can't say I've liked her in other things because I can't speak much for her role in Ex Machina. She doesn't talk. And I can't speak much for her role in Annihilation because she's a silvery mirror alien.
That also doesn't talk.
Yeah, that doesn't talk. So I'm like, I don't want to blame her. It could be on the writing, but to me, she felt very cardboard. And so it made it very difficult for me to care about anything involving her. And I almost was like, okay, I wish the show had nothing to do with like the investigation of DEVS and was just the stuff inside. Toward the end, I started changing my mind, and I appreciated where her character arc had gone, which is one of those things where sometimes you just got to get to the end and see how it all wraps up to fully appreciate the early stuff.
Yeah.
But it's another one of those shows I'd give a caveat to for anybody getting into it is like, push through the first like 3 or 4 episodes to get to the good stuff. But that's really like that's probably my major complaint about the show is that I didn't like the main character very much.
Yeah. I'm going to say that I disagree. And
What?
what? So I
expected this. I was I'm sure this is just not working for me.
Yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed that character. I felt like like they play up the fact that she has like this really strategic mind, and the fact that she constantly is steps ahead of what she has to be. And she even makes, in her basically her final move, she makes a play that changes everything. And that's the reason why it doesn't work past a certain point, is because she is this different force as compared to everything else. And even in the earlier parts of the story, I felt like that she had some really good line deliveries. And on top of that, a lot of the dialogue that she has the things about that character are things that directly tie back to the end in order to make all those things work and line up. Every piece of dialogue in the show is 100% like timed out and perfectly tied back into little bows on everything else. Save for one character who I didn't enjoy as much, which was Kenton.
Oh, yeah.
Kenton is easily the only character in the entire show that is completely one note. No other thing other than he's just a fucking scumbag.
Well, to me, it seemed like they were trying to copy Mike from Breaking Bad.
He literally,
Yeah.
I was like, he is Mike Ehrmantraut, 100%.
They wanted to take that character, but not have any of the like redeeming or interesting or funny qualities about Mike.
Yeah.
And just have him be the badass, like scary old man killer that they enjoy. Like veteran who's all hardened and will do what what needs to be done to get the job done. Like, I'll kill anybody. So when he was offed, I was like, cool. And loved the homeless guy in general as a character. Thought he was great. So when his reveal came around that he was a spy and he sat down and had that conversation with her, I was like, this is so fucking cool. I was on the edge of my seat. I was like, this show is awesome.
Yeah. Like I said, the Kenton character, he's a kind of a bit player actor, someone who does a lot of like character work. His name is Zach Greniers. And like I said, that character is very one note. It does its job. There are a lot of really tense moments that exist around that character. The fight scene in the parking garage, the interrogation scene with Jamie, and that last fight scene. Those things are very tense, and they like all of the big like angry parts of the score. Those all like tie into that character, which help it a little bit. But like I said, the character itself is just kind of like.
Well, I was expecting there to be an episode where like he does some horrible thing, and then you get to see him go home, and you get to see like what his like lonely, shitty home life is, and you get some backstory, and then you understand why he's so the way he is, and that never really happens in the show, which I guess I'm fine with, but just remove that character. But they needed to have, because Nick Offerman's character is not like a terrifying force who goes out and kills people. He has other people do his dirty work. He likes to think of himself as like hands clean. Like he doesn't want to think I ever murdered anybody. He even has that funny but terrifying conversation with Jamie where he's like, oh, what happened? And he's like, oh, he almost drowned me, and he bent my finger back until it broke. And Nick Offerman's like, oh, I didn't know any of that. He's like, I'm so sorry that he did that. And he's like, you're kidding? Like, you're saying you're sorry? And he's like, I didn't know. Like, I don't get my hands dirty.
So then, like, what's Kenton's motivation?
That's what I'm saying, is that because we don't get that motivation, his character is missing something.
Yeah.
Like,
so I get why he killed Sergei, because Nick Offerman was like, kill him. But everything after that was...
It seems he's taking it personally, but my thought was, is it supposed to be implied that he's seen what the future is supposed to look like?
No, Kenton has no idea.
Because that would have been my thought of why he takes it personally. If you had seen the future and you think he might have interpreted it as the world's going to end and it's because of this girl. That was my thought. Why he took it so personally was he's like, I'm the only person who's taking this as seriously as it needs to be taken, so I'm going to make this my personal vendetta to like track her down and kill her. That made sense to me. But if he doesn't know what is going on with the future, what is his interest in tracking her down and killing her?
Yeah, that was basically what he said, is that he wasn't going to prison and that he was going to find a way to end it.
But it wasn't even hinted at that there was anybody even digging into Sergei's death.
Yeah.
It just was weird.
And I realized as the show went on that I felt like the majority of the stuff that worked as setup for the main plot is pretty loose. Like, to me, all of the like getting us to the point where she's investigating DEVS is kind of loose. Like
the Russian spy shit.
The Russian spy shit to me feels like it didn't need to be there and is a little bit loose. It was just their excuse to have a character who sneaks into DEVS or whatever and like gets, they need to set up the murder. And then like, to me, there was just a lot of it. And I know John is like champing at the bit now to be like, I got to defend my show, but
that's what you sound like.
Yeah.
Hey man, those are my potatoes.
But yeah, I was like, I didn't feel like that stuff was like airtight, but I was fine with it because it got us to the stuff we needed to get to. So it's not a complaint, it's just an observation.
Yeah.
Suspension of disbelief, huh?
Yeah. But It does. We wouldn't have that great reveal without the Russian spy timeline.
I mean, we still could have had the homeless guy just be your friend and sneak in and kill the guy.
Yeah,
I would like that better.
with
I
a-
actually disliked that he was a Russian spy.
Say
but...
with a fucking garrote and full blown combat moves.
So you're saying that you don't believe that a homeless person could strangle somebody with some dude? Homeless people are feisty as fuck.
That one wasn't though. He was chill, at least as far as we knew.
All right, well, I'll see how you do in a bum fight.
I definitely not going to get into a bum fight. I brought up a piece of conversation, and I was saying that I felt like the character of Lyndon was basically just there to make, and this was way before I'd seen any of the cool shit that Lyndon does. But I like that Lyndon was there just to make Lily seem like more effeminate. Because at that point we hadn't heard any pronouns or anything like that, so I just assumed, because the actress is an actress and is a woman, that was a female character.
Yeah, so I, about episode 4, got curious because I thought I had mentioned a character called Lyndon a he, and I had been under the impression throughout the entire show that Lyndon was a female, just from looking at Lyndon. And then I heard the name Lyndon, and I was like, well, that's probably, usually a guy's name. So I just looked it up, and Kaylee identifies as female, is a female actress, decided to take on the part as a challenge. I was reading interviews, and she was just like, yeah, and I was telling you, but this is before you had gotten to the end, so I didn't want to go too in depth. To me, that fits a little bit into the themes of it. It adds a little almost like multiple dimensions within one person, and a little bit of that uncanny weirdness that ties into the overall theme of creating a person or creating, she's creating a person of an entirely different gender, and they don't. I liked that they didn't bring it up in the show. They're just like, this is a male character, a 19-year-old male character, and they never bring it up. I was expecting one episode for them to be like, it's like you, Lyndon. Remember your transition, and then we would find out it was a transsexual character or something. But I'm glad they didn't do that. It was just female actress wanted to play a male character.
Yeah, and that doesn't seem like the kind of thing that Alex Garland would even take the time to address, and would just be like, oh yeah, this is a thing. Fucking take it or leave it, asshole.
Yeah.
That's just how he is.
And then I just wanted to briefly say that Stephen McKinley, who played Stuart, was also awesome. All of the scenes with Lyndon and Stuart were great. Stuart's whole bit, I love that actor. I love him in everything that he's in. I always think he is just a fun presence.
Yeah.
And so I thought that his arc was really nice, and I liked what his character ended up doing in the end. I felt made sense. I felt like his whole spiraling, once he started discovering what the power of this whole thing was. I liked how it was exploring different people's reactions to basically having the power of God.
Yeah.
And how different people were interpreting this, and he was like, we got to stop it, which led to a pretty rockin' finale.
Yeah.
I have to say.
Yeah, let's talk about it, because that shit fucked me up. I mean, we've had talks before about how we could be in a simulation now, and this, to me, was terrifying. I was like, dude, they're in it, and even Forrest is like, we're the only ones that know, and nobody else knows.
Yeah.
And they're all just going to keep living their lives. That could be us now. And we have no idea, and we'll never know. It's fucking terrifying. It's like the Matrix
There's
shit.
some quantum computer that's holding us together.
I was gonna say that's the other thing that the movie was screaming at me was at the end. This was almost like it was almost like it was a Matrix prequel, because Forrest basically created the Matrix, just not with all the evil aliens and everything.
Yeah.
But he created the Matrix. It also reminded me of how in Matrix Reloaded, the architect talks about how there are other versions of the Matrix, and it introduces the idea that the Matrix has to be rebooted. And that the other versions of the Matrix had glitches that led to things like werewolves and apocalypses and vampires and ghosts and weird glitches. And that reminded me of how, to me, the really nightmarish thing that it reveals to you in the finale is that they are one version of Forrest and Lily that ended up in the good simulation, and that there are an infinite number of other simulations. And it briefly cuts to a completely different terrifying looking horror movie scenario that they ended up in.
Right.
And he's like, let's just say, and he even tells Allison's character, he's like, wish me luck.
Yeah.
And he's just playing roulette and hoping that he lands in a good world. And then all of these other versions of him are like, fuck, now I have to live in whatever, which of course could be fodder for expansions or sequels. But I know Garland's already said that he saw this. He likes to think of this as
it's a
its
complete
own
thing,
complete separate thing. And if he
Yeah,
did
they're calling
explore
it a
anything, it would be a different facet of this world. But yeah, I mean, so basically everything comes to a head with basically a big exposition episode, which I think was what, episode 6? Is that the house conversation episode where Allison's character and then they play frisbee outside, which I thought was
Yeah, I want to say house. That's number 6.
That's where I was like 100% sold on the show, because I felt like all of the scenes, I was like, okay, this is a big exposition dump, but at this point in the series, we need to know what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
So it basically sets up that something crazy is about to happen, and that the machine is no longer able to tell the future past a certain point. We've already learned that Forrest, basically at this point, his intention is to somehow bring his daughter and his wife back from being dead. They tell Lily, hey, you have something to do with being at DEVS when shit goes down in 21 hours or whatever.
Yeah.
You have something to do with it. We don't know what's going to happen, but we've watched the next day, and basically the whole finale plays out with Forrest and... I keep calling her Allison. What's her character's name?
Katie.
Katie. So they basically know everything that's going to happen throughout the course of the finale, and it plays out with them playing out the narrative, and Lily basically, us walking through, Lily and Lyndon and Stuart, kind of just walking through the narrative that they already know is going to happen, and we get to see how that unfolds.
Yeah.
And Lily, of course, immediately is like, I'm just not going to go to DEVS. And as soon as she said that, I was like, well, yeah, some shit's going to go down.
Yeah,
That's going to take you. That's
you're
going to
gonna
make
go
you
to
go to
DEVS.
DEVS. Yeah. Your boyfriend's going to die.
Yeah, I was like, oh, man.
Yeah, I was like, I liked him, and I liked that they had their little moment where she was like, I never really knew Sergey, but I know you, and they had their, and I was like, yes, I like them together.
Yes.
And of course, he immediately had to.
When they were doing her
Bite it.
flashbacks, I was hoping that was glimpses of the future, and that was Jamie talking to his daughter that he named Lily. I was hoping that it was going to be happy.
Yeah.
Because Nick Offerman or Forrest kept saying, like, everything's going to be okay.
So, segue. Sorry to take things off track. But there's a shit ton of symbolism and foreshadowing in this show. A shit ton. And these are just some of the things that I picked up on first glance. If I rewatch the show, I could probably find a million more things. But anytime that Nick Offerman says everything's going to be fine or everything's going to be okay, somebody dies. Guaranteed.
I knew it had a link to death, because my thought was he must have some plan to bring people back to life, which was I was like, I don't know how it's going to happen, but I was like, he says that every time death is brought up in a conversation or somebody dies. And so I was like, obviously he's saying, don't worry, I'm going to bring them all back in some capacity or something.
Well, I
so
think
was
there's
like,
definitely some religious ties between him and Katie and Lily, like this kind of trinity of people, and then him almost creating an afterlife, right?
That's what he says. He's like, I think of this as like the afterlife. Yeah.
But yeah, so he says everything's going to be all right to Jamie, and then Jamie dies like the next day. He says everything's going to be all right in the vision, and then in the actual real life happening of the elevators or the
lift.
The lift, yeah, that's fine. That scene, and in all of those instances, somebody kicks a bucket. But there's also other scenes where he like foreshadows what's going to happen, like during that conversation that he has with Kenton out on the bench, where he's like, I got to quit smoking. He's like, you don't have to worry about that, like, because he knows what's going to happen. And that was part of the reason why I knew that Kenton didn't know, is that he was just like, yeah, don't worry about that. It doesn't change anything. Part of my theory as to why he's like, oh yeah, everything's going to be okay, is that it's more about like that, like universally speaking, that everything's going to be okay, that everything is going to push forward. You are doing what you've been determined to do.
Well, yeah, I took it. I almost took it as like how some people who have gone through like intense tragedy, like he has, end up having that like wider scope of worldview where they start to see tragedy on like a much different wavelength than everybody else does. So when he's having that conversation with Jamie, and Jamie's like, oh, my tragedy or whatever doesn't even compare to yours. He's like, oh, I just lost my girlfriend or whatever. And he's like, oh, well, it is like losing the one you love, so it is comparable. He has a very interesting take on like what it is to lose things and lose people. Yeah. He obviously is in a different realm mentally than everybody else because of what he's gone through and what kind of like genius he is. So that's what I thought when I first started picking up on him saying it. It was almost like it reminded me of like Kurt Vonnegut, like in Slaughterhouse 5, like the classic saying is like, so it goes, which is basically just a way of saying like shit happens. Yeah. So it goes, like there are bigger fish to fry, like the universe is going to keep going. That's how I felt. I was like, it's either one. It's either he's just saying like, whatever, it's going to be fine in the big picture, or don't worry, I'm going to fix it, like with my machine.
So the machine that we saw with the mouse, that was them giving us a glimpse of him coding something and then it living in the simulation.
Somewhat. I think that it has to do with the ability to create life in the simulation, but also partially because I want to say that it was like super fossilized, that it was something that they used to be able to get back to a certain distance in time. So I don't know if they had the proper code to be able to say like, oh, I can go back like hundreds of thousands of years or whatever, which they eventually ended up doing.
Yeah.
But I want to say that they used that as kind of the building blocks as to how to go in reverse.
Well, yeah, we might have just missed when they said it or they left it vague, but I thought it was like they say later on that it has something to do with needing a little piece of the puzzle in order to extrapolate the larger puzzle. So I was like, obviously the mouse or the rat or whatever it is has something to do with like they needed that piece to create the simulation. So it could be, yeah, that it's like a super old fossil and they're basically extrapolating all other particles from that point on based on what is in the mouse, where it gets into like their big crazy computer pseudoscience. But yeah, I felt like that was just like they needed that. It reminded me of like the Codex or the Codec or whatever in Man of Steel, where he has like that skull that has like all of the DNA of Krypton on it. It reminded me of that idea where it's got like the history in the mouse or whatever, or like Jurassic Park with the mesquite.
Yeah. There was one other thing that I wanted to bring up as far as like Forrest just like casually foreshadowing things that are supposed to happen in people's futures. In the very first episode, when he brings Sergei to DEVS, he basically sets him down at the computer, shows him the code, and is like, don't worry, I know you're going to figure it out. Because he 100% knows that he's going to figure it out because he knows what happens. And that seems super like sleeper, not like a big deal kind of thing until you know what happens. And once you've seen the end, you're like, that line has a lot more impact to it than you'd think it does.
Well, and then then you start to get more paranoid once you start to realize that they can look into the future, because like when he says things like that, and then you realize like, oh, he knew, and how he's so nonchalant and talks about the tram lines, he's basically just revealing to you how he knew what Sergei was going to do for that entire episode, and you're curious, you're like, does he have cameras everywhere? Does he have surveillance? You don't know at that point that it's like he can see the future basically.
So then the simulation that they're in at the end, are we to assume that they're not building a DEVS similar to the DEVS that we know, where they're developing a supercomputer? And are we to assume that Sergei is not a spy?
No, so we are to assume that Sergei is still a spy. DEVS does not exist. The field that DEVS was in just had him out there dancing in a field with his wife and his daughter.
And that was the exact spot?
That was the exact
Which
spot.
is obviously very symbolic, where it's like all of that stuff that came out of that, he doesn't need it if he just has what he was trying to get the whole time. Yeah.
But we still think that he's a spy.
Oh, yeah. Sergei is definitely a spy because he still has the Sudoku app, and he's very
And he freaks
like
out when she tries to look at it. Yeah.
And even to tie that back to like the very beginning of the story, like there are like moments where if you like before you've seen anything, you think that Sergei is totally just a normal dude. But like if you go back and you look at little components of his character, like he's very private about the way, like when he's looking at his phone, like he's waiting until Lily is turned away and then he'll pull out his phone. Or like when they wake up, they're both kind of stretching and waking up. He doesn't say like good morning or like address her in any way. He immediately goes to his phone first. Like those little tiny, like I said, there are things even from the first moment of the show that tie very quickly back to the end. In the first episode, the outfit that she's wearing, she has an infinity loop necklace, and they show that at the end as well. But that also shows that she is the one that breaks things and shows that there are multiple infinite realities where the slightest variation happens.
Yeah, and I thought that it was smart to just leave it kind of ambiguous, where she goes to look at the app and then he takes the phone away and gets kind of weird and then walks away. That kind of leaves it up to you about like, okay, well then you can interpret, or more importantly, she can interpret how she feels about it. And the more important thing I think is that she realizes that she can't trust Sergei, like even if it is a new reality, and goes more with like the person she can trust, which I felt like was the happy ending, is she goes and again, left ambiguous, but you can assume with everything that she remembers them being through and how he was by her side and everything, that she'll end up with Jamie. And that's a nice little happy ending, even if there's that awesome little part of the entire thing with the finale that to me would drive me completely insane. It makes you wonder, like, given time, like Forrest says, oh, you'll get used to it. Like this idea of like, we are the messiahs. Like we have to bear the cross of knowing that like this reality is a simulation, would drive me absolutely insane. But it's such a cool, weird, interesting idea. So it just brings up a lot of questions. Like, would she tell anybody? Would, you know, at any point, or would she just, would you be able to live that way? Like, knowing all this stuff about how reality works. But
She's already dead. It's like that Johnny Depp movie.
I almost said Chocolat for some reason.
Transcendence or something? Doesn't he
Yeah,
get sucked
yeah.
into a computer?
Yeah, Transcendence. He gets sucked in like Jumanji.
Yeah.
I was just gonna say that, like, so in terms of her character and like the lead up to the finale and everything, one part that I think was supposed to like blow your mind was like the idea that she threw the gun out of the. So basically, like, Forrest shows her the future, shows she's gonna kill him in the elevator, and that the elevator's gonna crash and they're both gonna die. Which I was very confused about at first, but then I realized I assume it's because they're in a vacuum, so they're suffocating.
Yes.
Okay, yeah. So she sees that whole thing and then gets basically to walk through it. She makes the decision when they get in the elevator to toss the gun out as the doors are closing to basically change the future. And you're supposed to be like, oh my God. For the last 3 episodes, when we learned what DEVS was, in my head, I was like, it's a fucking cult. Like, in my head, I was like, okay, she has this idea. I was like, try it out. Try out the idea of like doing your own thing. Like, you don't have to believe what they're saying just because they made a machine, which I think she does come to the realization where she's like, you know, she basically is saying like, you made this machine and like you thought you knew everything about how it was going to work, but like free will is an option. Like, I was able to make a choice. That I thought was really cool, but it was played up. But then I felt like the show tried to play it up as like, this means she's like the one. It was a very like, she is like, and they have that whole, I want to throw up in my mouth when Allison has that whole like, she's laying in bed with Forrest and she's like, oh my God, Lily is so special. She just sees things the way they are. Like, oh my God, she's just like so smart. I was like, okay, I get it. Like, show me those things, but you don't have to repeat it every episode. It felt like some character had to be like, Lily just does whatever she wants. Oh, that's just Lily. And I was like, the show's just explaining to me that her character is special instead of, that stuff annoyed me. And so when she made the choice, I was like, cool, but I'm not blown away by it. I was like, waiting for her to do that. I was like, cool. I want to get to the point where she makes her own decision and changes things. And then, yeah, it's still like, but she's still kind of on tram lines. So yeah, again, not things that I hated, but things that I was like, I wasn't like blown completely out of the water by that like revelation that she was able to make her own choice.
So once again, I fucking disagree. Like, that scene I thought was fucking mind blowing.
I was expecting. How were you not expecting that when she got in the elevator? She was going to throw the gun at it or do something different. Like, that's
well, yeah, but I wasn't expecting her to just completely give up her only advantage. I thought that she was going to like shoot Allison, or I mean Katie, excuse me, or something along those lines, or just kill herself. Like, I thought that it was going to be something different than what it ended up being. Yeah. And I think that the fact that she chose to basically just take the pacifist run was something that I didn't expect at all.
Well, I think it's interesting that she made a choice, but at the same time still ended up where she would have been anyway. So did her choice really matter? Not necessarily, because they still both died.
Mm. Yeah.
So they still got to the same point. So it's like,
that's where I felt like the show surprised me, which I guess like I like sometimes when a show does that, where they have like almost like a tease surprise, and then they have to throw you off guard, and that actually is probably why that scene worked as well as it did in as a whole for me, was that she makes that choice, you think everything's going to change, and then it still fucks her, they still get fucked, and it's still like they still die, and to me that was more interesting than if she had thrown the gun out and destroyed the machine and exited and it was all over and everybody was happily ever after, which is what I was expecting, which is why I think I was like, aw, when she did that. Yeah. And then when the elevator crashes, one, beautifully shot twice. We get to see it happen like twice in super slow-mo or whatever.
And two different ways. Like, her way is the same, but like you get to see the Forrest component as well, because he's not already dead.
I thought it was nice that was a little bit different. So yeah, basically Stuart decides that they can't get out, this machine can't get out. They go to replay the future they think is going to happen, and he deactivates the vacuum on the floating elevator, and it crashes and they die. And Lily wakes up and she's in an alternate reality. I like that it leaves a lot of questions about like how much control Forrest had over what the simulation ended up being. Like, were his only caveats like make everything 100% accurate to where it was, except for the people, these specific people that died. Like, it makes me curious, like, if he just picked, like, maybe he had a family member, like, somebody who had an uncle who died, and they were really fucked up about it, and he was just like, oh, I'll bring him back in his new simulation. If he just cherry-picked, like, the people he thought deserved to be, like, brought back in the simulation, or is it everybody who...
I honestly
they both were close with, since they both went into the simulation?
I think it's just everybody. In the simulation is everybody.
Yeah,
It's just a reality, and they're the only ones that are aware of it.
Yeah, so I think that it's not necessarily something where he made a world. I think it's that he plugged the two of them into a world that already exists. And the simulation has every possible scenario and every possible reality, and he picked the one that he found the fastest that was the best that turned out right, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was super impacted by the ending. Like it made me think a lot about like all of the different characters and the places they ended up in, because I mean, like, it's kind of scary for Lily in that moment, but it's just absolutely heartbreaking for Katie, because she basically has to watch as the person that she loves gets to go on and be with the person that he loves. It's not like she gets up and leaves or anything like that. She just is probably hanging out there just watching him live his life. And that's fucking so sad.
Yeah, that's very depressing. And then the scene where she has the senator character or whatever come in.
Yeah.
And you think, I was like, oh my God, please do not tell me that the senator is going to have like a sequel plot line of like, now that you've perfected it, we must use it for evil. But instead it was just like, just make sure it stays on, which I thought was a really poignant, like really sweet way to like end her character arc and end that whole relationship. Was she was just like, let's just make sure that this stays on. So, which is a scary thought, but also like it's sweet. She's like, okay, her mission is she loves him so much, she's gonna make sure that he gets to like live this life that he worked so hard to create by making sure that the funds are there and everything, like to keep DEVS running. Not like the mission's complete now. We don't need any more. Like he got what he wanted, and now they just got to keep it on, which I think is a really cool. The villain ended up succeeding in the end, and much like any good villain, very gray as to whether they're actually a villain or not by the end. And that's, you know, what I thought was so compelling about his character was that by the end I was like, well, he wasn't a bad guy. He was just a very determined person who went to great lengths to get what he wanted and was probably misguided in a lot of ways, but in the end made at least a couple people's lives better. Like, you know, fucked up some others, but who cares? Just make a new one, make a new simulation. Something I wanted to bring up real quick before we wrap things up in terms of the little like weird, the little Easter eggs and things, is that Lily's character is potentially a reference to Lilith, who is the first woman that God created before Eve.
Yeah, I have another character name reference as well. Sergei's like his name isn't actually Sergei. We don't know. We end up finding out what it is, but his given last name for that character or that person that he's living as is Pavlov, which was a very famous
rings a bell.
Yeah, a very famous basically scientist who used like bells and like food and all these different things in order to basically train a certain response from animals, and basically creating and messing with cause and effect and determination in an animal, which kind of ties everything back. Like there's so many
I thought that was a little on the nose.
Little tiny layers that like exist throughout this entire story, and I guarantee sitting back down to watch it again, I would find so many more things.
Yeah, I think watching this through a religious lens would probably send you down a whole different rabbit hole too.
Well, yeah, and that's another reason why I feel like this is very much in that Matrix category of sci-fi, where it draws a lot of inspiration from philosophy, religion, other science fiction, things like that, to where you could watch it with entirely different lenses. Just be like, you're at the eye doctor. I'm gonna watch it with one, then with two. And do it that way. Well, as we were gearing up to, I guess, rate this thing, I just want to say that I was very pleasantly surprised by this show in general, but also the outcome of this discussion, because when I was originally watching DEVS, I was like, man, I don't know if we're ever going to get around to talking about this on the podcast, because I wasn't terribly interested in those first couple episodes. And I was like, this could end up being a really boring disappointment. And instead we got to the point of like John wanting to stab people over how much he loves DEVS now, and like all three of us being like pretty on board with it. So I think that's a really nice, pleasant outcome for something that I felt like I was like, I got to force myself to watch this so that we can talk about it on the pod. So yeah, out of 5 alternate realities, some horrific, some just like the afterlife, what would you rate DEVS, Anthony Perez?
I would say a 4. I think that there's plot points that are weird and don't always work, and some of the writing's not great. But for the most part, I mean, we get some great performances from the actors. It's gorgeous. It's very much a movie on TV, and it kind of fucked me up at the end there. I still believe that it's a horror show disguised as a sci-fi show.
Yeah, no, it definitely bridges that gap.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I would 100% watch it again. I would recommend it to anybody that's a fan of Alex Garland's previous work and stuff like The Matrix. I think if you are into those vehicles, then this will be right up your alley.
All right, out of 5 parallel universes that some are nightmares and some are just like the afterlife, John Brasher, what would you rate DEVS?
This is going to come as a shock to everyone who's listened to the episode up to this point, but I'm going to give it a 5. I fucking loved every single second of watching this show. There may have been tiny, little, microscopic things about the plot.
You always say that anytime someone says that there's plot points. Well, if you want to nitpick, well, if it's tiny.
Yeah, it's the classic defense. Like somebody has a problem with something
Every
you like.
time.
And it's like, well, if you're gonna nitpick.
This is very true. But I don't feel like it was like super nitpicking. Like I know that there are things that could potentially not land for everybody, but I don't feel like they're any fault of what was created at the end.
Yeah, and I hope any of this, like the stuff that I said doesn't, because it seems like I haven't seen a lot of articles like complaining about the lead character or anything like that. It is a more recent show, so there might be more analysis coming out in the future to read on, but I haven't seen many people disliking, and again, I don't want to chalk it up to her acting or anything, and any of the other stuff that I complain about, again, it's mostly just like, this was an observation of something that didn't sit perfectly with me, but that doesn't mean that overall the experience wasn't a 4 out of 5 parallel universes, some nightmares, some just like the afterlife.
I disagree, but I definitely understand. Like I said, it just happened to land directly into my wheelhouse, and I get that gives me a bias that not the majority of your typical viewers won't get. And while I don't consider y'all to be typical viewers, I do think that, like I said, it just happened to hit me in a lot of things that interest me personally. And those connections, plus the fact that the way that everything plays out, the way that everything connects back to each other, and I mean, going as far as like my favorite show up to this point has been Breaking Bad. This is probably pushing up there pretty close.
Ooh, in just 8 episodes too.
Yeah,
That's
in
impressive.
just 8 episodes, because it knows how to basically treat it like it's like a piece of music. You start low and then you build that crescendo up to the end, until you just have this cacophony of fucking just madness at the end. And I fucking loved every minute of it. Highly recommend to people who are like me.
Yeah, so I'll give it a 4 out of 5. But that wraps up our discussion for DEVS. I believe in whatever universe you're in, if you have any comments, if you checked out DEVS and you want to let us know what you thought about it, please hit us up on the socials. But in the meantime, we're going to keep chugging along to our watch list.
Patrick, what is it? Where are you going?
I've got to return some videotapes.
For me, I've been watching a lot more drama stuff lately, so I don't have a ton, but I did watch a movie on Shudder called Dead Shack, and this was about a family that goes to a cabin in the woods.
I was going to check this out the other night. How was it?
And then there's, I don't want to say too much about what's going on, because I was like, wait, what the fuck is going on? But it was enjoyable. It's kind of like schlocky, just here for fun. But it was good. It was interesting. It's definitely more for teenagers, or if you're somebody who likes just kind of campiness, then it'd be right up your alley. And then John and I also watched
Hansel and Gretel Get Baked.
Hansel and Gretel Get Baked.
I was also going to watch that, but then I thought that sounds...
It's fucking goofy as shit.
Yeah.
But it's so enjoyable.
Setup's pretty good. It's funny. And then the ending's decent. The middle kind of flounders a little bit. But, I mean... It's a stoner comedy. So
Well, I was gonna
know
say-
that getting in.
Well, yeah, I was like, I don't understand why that would be something that you would be like super into watching unless your intention was to also be stoned while you were watching it. I feel like that's like what those comedies are made for.
I think
is
we
like,
had some libations and kind of just enjoyed
Well,
it.
yeah, and that makes. I'm like, yeah, I'm not gonna sit stone cold sober and watch like a movie that is about being high all the time. Yeah. Cool. Anything else on your?
That's it for me.
Cool. I'll have to check that out. The Shaq one.
So for me, aside from watching Hansel and Gretel Get Baked, which has a weird, I won't call it a cameo, but like a weird very brief appearance from Carrie Elwes of Princess Bride fame.
You mean of Saw fame?
Or of Black Christmas fame.
Or Stranger Things?
Okay, we get it. He's been in stuff. Man.
I haven't really been watching much other than devs and stupid shit on YouTube, but I have been enjoying basically going back and forth with Perez on some weird like escape room games.
Oh, nice.
So we've been playing the Room series, and we've also been playing some of the Cube Escape. It's Rusty something or other.
Rusty Lake.
Rusty Lake.
Rusty Trombone.
Not Rusty
We
Lake.
have not been doing that.
Rusty Lake escape series, and they're super creepy and atmospheric.
Super creepy.
Yeah, they're a lot of fun. The Room does cost money. The Cube ones are completely free. I would highly suggest to check them out. There aren't like any like super crazy ads that get in your way, but they're a lot of fun to play.
Sweet. Well, I'm glad your guys' watch lists were a little bit shorter, because I'd like to take you over to
Silva's Spooky Movie Corner.
I'm fucking done, dude.
Welcome to Silva's Spooky Movie Corner.
You have too much time on your hands.
All right, so I have like 7 things on here, so I'll try to go as quick as possible.
Fire them off.
So first, I really, really think that you guys should check out a new Netflix cartoon called The Midnight Gospel. Have you heard about this? Have you seen this?
No.
So The Midnight Gospel is a cartoon made by Pendleton Ward, who created Adventure Time.
Mm-hmm.
And he decided that he was never going to do animation again, and then he started listening to, Duncan Trussell, his podcast. He has this podcast where he has these, it's very much like the Joe Rogan experience. He has these really long conversations about like meditation and death and drugs and all this stuff. Basically, they took this and built an animated show premise around it. It's about this pink guy named Clancy who has an illegal world simulator, and he runs a spacecast, like a podcast, called The Midnight Gospel. And so he travels to these simulated worlds, ties into what we were just talking about, goes into these simulated worlds. All of them are experiencing a different variety of apocalypse, and he like interviews random people, and the interviews are audio like of the conversations from the podcasts. And so it's mixed in with like the first episode is he meets the president of this world, and they're under a zombie invasion, and they're just talking about like the safety of hallucinogenic drugs while they're blasting zombie heads off. Mm-hmm. It's hilarious and actually really profound. There were a couple times where I cried.
Shit.
It's really thoughtful. It's one of those thinky adult cartoons. It's been compared a lot to Rick and Morty, just like in terms of some of the headier themes. I checked out on the theme of things that keep coming up in trivia that we need to check out. I watched Audition. Because it's come up a million times in our trivia, and I've seen it on like every list of movies that'll fuck you up.
Did it fuck you up?
It didn't, because it was made like in the early 90s, I believe, and it was before the like torture porn craze started. So I've seen a lot worse things, but this movie plays almost entirely like a weird Japanese like romantic movie up until a point, and then when the reveal about the main character or the girl happens, it becomes really disturbing and really fucked up, and I was getting some chills. It gets pretty crazy, but it can be pretty slow. But I'm glad I watched it. The majority of the stuff that I have to recommend coming up next spawns from a documentary that I checked out that I think you guys would really enjoy. It's called You're So Cool, Brewster. And it is the making of Fright Nights 1 and 2, the originals. Awesome documentary. It's like 3 hours long because they do both movies, and they talk a little bit about the remake. And so cool. I mean, I had seen Fright Night, and but just seeing like all the behind the scenes stuff and like how much they put into that movie made me want to go watch Fright Night. So next up on my recommendation list, Fright Night, the original. Such a good movie. Chris Sarandon, who I always think of as Jack Skellington, or from Child's Play. Mm-hmm. Chris Sarandon is excellent. Everybody is great in that movie, and all the effects are ridiculous. Like, that's such a good-looking, like, creepy movie. So I watched Fright Night, and then I was kind of on that theme, and I ended up checking out a movie that you had recommended called Summer of '84.
Oh, yeah.
Which I really enjoyed.
Yeah, that's fun.
Yeah, I thought it was good. It had that one guy pop up from, I think, Mad Men and some other stuff.
Yeah.
He was in that show Love. Yeah, he's like the next door neighbor. Yeah. Plays a really good creepster. Very cool little 80s throwback. Nothing like blowing me out of the water, but as I was watching it, I realized that it was almost exactly Fright Night, but instead of a vampire, it's a serial killer. Kind of Disturbia, but basically, but set in the 80s. And then last night, I checked out Sea Fever because we had talked about it on our news section. So after I posted the trailer, I was like, I looked it up, and it had like an 85 or something. Yeah, so I was like, cool, I'll check it out. It was great. I thought that it was basically a better Underwater. Like Underwater was.
And we liked Underwater.
Yeah. So it was a better directed version of that.
Okay.
Looked gorgeous, was very well paced. I thought the acting was great. Originally supposed to have Toni Collette in the lead role, which I was surprised by, but she had like some conflicts. Yeah.
I love Toni Collette.
But the thing that I thought was funny was that Summer of '84 and this movie were both from the same production company, which is Gunpowder and Sky.
Oh.
And so I was like, oh, that's a weird little connection. And they also did the 50 States of Fright that's on Quibi.
Oh.
Yeah, so I went on their site, and they have the Dust Division, which is all their sci-fi stuff. They have a ton of stuff to check out on there. And then they have the Alter Division, which is all horror stuff. Oh. So I enjoyed that. And then the last thing, Sea Fever, I guess, beyond that, it's cool. It got some Lovecraftian, Contagion stuff. A lot of people were reminded about what's going on with COVID right now because it does involve some Contagion stuff and being isolated. Yeah. Or contained. So I would definitely recommend that movie. And then the last thing that I checked out that I will talk about briefly is a movie called The Poughkeepsie Tapes. Have you guys seen this?
That sounds very familiar.
Yeah, so this was a movie that came out
a
while ago. Yeah. I checked it out based on a recommendation from YouTube as it being like pretty disturbing. And the basic premise is that it's a mockumentary about these tapes that were left by a serial killer who is killing women in this small town. And it's, your standard like documentary, but the majority of the movie, and this is why it has had such a troubled release schedule and why most people haven't seen it until recently, is because it's pretty fucked up. Like the majority of the movie is like the snuff film type tapes that are extremely realistic in my opinion of him like torturing these women. And they do this whole plot line with the one woman that he kept prisoner for years and years and show like, I don't want to spoil it, but like the things that happened to her. It's not to the point where it's actual snuff film. They obviously like cut around and there's a lot of like women screaming in tough situations where I was like, I feel like I'm just sitting here watching serial killer tapes. And if somebody walked in on me, I would be like, I don't blame you for being freaked out. But I mean, it got me. It's not anything, again, mind-blowing, except for the fact that it reminds me a lot of Sinister in that the videotape segments are absolutely terrifying. Mm-hmm. In the vein that Sinister, I feel like, is not a super interesting movie outside of the videotape segments. Right. And that's what the Poughkeepsie Tapes is like. So you want something that ties into that true crime like itch, and you will be convinced by the end of this that this guy is real, even though it's completely... They even presented at the end, like, here's the people that died, here's all the people we interviewed, and it's not until like 5 minutes into the credits that they start showing production stuff and casts and things. So, it plays into that. So I'd recommend that. But that is my very long quarantine edition of Silva's Spooky Movie Corner. All right, so that wraps it up for the watch list this week and for this probably never going to happen again because everybody probably hated it segment, Anthony's Spooky Movie Corner. We are going to go ahead and continue what we started last week, which is shouting out some new Instagram followers. So I'm going to go from oldest to most recent with these next few fellas. Thank you, everybody. Number one, we have @ChickWithAStick podcast, which a lot of these are podcasts, which is really cool. So check these out. @PodUnion. This is, I believe, kind of like a conglomerate of podcast people supporting each other, which is super cool. @APOMcast. APOMcast. Okay. We have Listen to the B-Sides, which I believe, from the research I've done, is a music podcast. Mm-hmm. So maybe that's something that our fellows over at the Unexamined Hype might be interested in. Then we have ugly truth, and then last but not least @critical banter, which I believe is also a podcast based on the name. So these shout outs that I'm doing now are a couple weeks old. We're still growing on the Instagram and on the Facebook and stuff. So I appreciate everybody who has been paying attention to the complete garbage that I've been putting out there into the ether to try to grow our podcast. So yeah, those are all the shout outs that I have this week. We will probably throw those up on Instagram when the episode comes out. Let you all know that we talked about you. So next week, we are going to be doing a new segment. We're going to just call it like underrated sci-fi films, underrated sci-fi movies. I, Anthony Silva, am going to be picking a sci-fi movie because I realized recently that I have a lot of these just kind of sitting in a box in my brain of really good sci-fi movies that I don't think anybody's ever heard of. So I'm going to be recommending one to the three of us. We're going to watch that movie, and then we are going to discuss that next week. I'm going to be announcing on social media, on the Instagram and stuff, what that movie is. We'll probably decide at some point within the next couple days. And then we will make that a recurring segment for probably both horror and sci-fi. But I feel like there's a lot more of those sci-fi gems that we haven't seen. We've really scraped the bottom of the barrel when it comes to horror. So
I'm sure there's stuff that's hidden in there, but definitely we've delved a little deeper into the horror territory for sure.
Yeah. So that's going to wrap it up for this week. I've been Anthony Silva, Internet Darling.
I've also been Anthony, but not Silva.
And I've been John.
Thank you guys for listening. Tune in next time.
Keep it creepy.
You can find Porcelain Peak on Apple Podcasts, Google Play Store, Spotify, TuneIn, and Stitcher. Wherever you listen, don't forget to rate, review, share, and subscribe so you never miss a spine-tingling episode. Don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and at porcelainpeak.com for additional content. Special thanks to Randy Greer for composing the Porcelain Peak intro music and to Anthony Silva for designing the Porcelain Peak logo. All episodes and additional content is hosted, written, produced, designed, and edited by the Porcelain Peak team, consisting of Anthony Perez, John Brasher, and Anthony Silva.
This has been a Weirdos for Weirdos production.